All right, students, so I'm going to just give you a couple quick tips here on how to complete this 6-4-6-5 Properties Worksheet. The way we're going to go about doing this is this worksheet, this assignment is really meant to get you to just understand a lot of the relationships, like what sides are equal, what segments are equal, what angles are equal, what angles have to maybe 90, 180, whatever. And then once you start to establish those relationships on what angles you know are equal, what sides you know are equal, then you can start to mix in a lot of the algebra and other things that we see. So a lot of it comes down to how do we apply those properties correctly. And I think just simply using numbers here will hopefully help us. So I'm not going to walk through this whole thing. I'm just going to give you some tips here on how to get started so you can complete this. This is your homework assignment. You will need to take pictures of this and submit it to Canvas. So let's look at the rectangle here. So what are some things that I know? I know that all of the angles here are 90 degrees, as in like the entire angle, right? Like DAB. I wouldn't just call this angle A here, I would call it angle DAB. And you're really continuing on. This angle over here, 90 as well. So, maybe pause it here and start thinking to yourself, all right, what segments do I know are equal? What are other things I can mark on the rectangle here based on what I know about its properties? Okay, hopefully you've done that. So let's think about this a little bit more. I know opposite sides are congruent. So like AD is congruent to BC, AB is congruent to DC. I know that the diagonals are bisected and also congruent in a rectangle. So not only are AE and EC congruent, but they're also equal to these two parts here. And then just one other thing, we talked about as well. We talked about how I know angle ABE here, ABE, is congruent to a few other angles in there. Do you know one of them? That would be angle EDC, alternate interior there. But also based on the fact that we can see based on the markings here that these two triangles are congruent. I also know that angle ABE is congruent to angle BAE and ECD, these two here. And then I can continue that further and even mark, this angle, all the rest of these interior angles here as congruent. So really then what we can do is start to fill in the numbers based on a lot of the relationships that we see here based on the properties, right? We take the properties, then we can mark the picture, and then we can use that to fill in all the numbers. So, really I'll let you start to do that from here. One of the things I want to point out, though, in particular, is I want you to notice how, look how you're asked to find all of these angles. And all you know is angle ABE. So it's really interesting how a lot of that comes down to the fact that, again, these two triangles here are congruent and these two here are congruent. So once we start to fill in one of those angles, we can fill in them all. I'll let you go through, some of that there, especially with the segments, but just kind of getting you off on the right track here. We know that angle ABE, as we said, is 36 degrees. So we can fill in a lot of the other angles that we know are also 36 degrees. I can then take the fact that I know that these two angles here add up to 90. The total here is 90. So I can then say, well, what's 90 minus 36? Right, we get 54. And then I can fill in a lot of angles there that are also 54 and go from there. Now, you'll also notice that it does ask you about angle BEC. So it wants to know the measure of this angle here. So how are we going to do that? Well, we know this angle, and we should be able to find this angle here. And then I can use the fact that I know these two angles, right? And what would we subtract from based on what we know about the angles of a triangle here? And then that will help me fill in a lot of these remaining angles here in the middle because we can use, supplementary angles as well as vertical angles to go from there. So that's just something to think about. Really, the idea is it's giving you kind of the bare minimum amount, and really, truthfully, the bare minimum amount of measurements and lengths for sides, measurements for angles, and you fill in the rest. So you can then continue that for the rhombus down here and look at the properties we talked about and, start to mark the picture and, ask yourself what angles are equal, what angles add up to 90, 180, what segments are equal, what segment is, like we also know AE, the length here is half of the whole here, AC. So, just things like that where you're applying the properties, mark the picture, ask questions, let me know how I can help you, and certainly try your best here in filling in all these measurements. Do the same thing on the back here for square, and you will, hopefully be able to fill in, all these segment lengths, all these angle measures. I do point out, notice how there are no measurements given here. I talked about this in my last video. You should, based on the properties you know of a square, be able to fill in all of those measurements, even though you're not given one to start with, like we were on rhombus and rectangle. So, as I mentioned, please let me know if you have any questions, and it's really important we practice these properties so that we can apply them, and we know the similarities and differences between all the parallelograms.